nice flow to it. Then we start dropping in the materials. So we know we wanted a lot of stones and woods. Want it to feel a little warmer than the actual exterior. And in this part, it's a little bit challenging because we have to make sure it feels like a unique level from the outside, but it still needs to feel like it's in the same world, in the same place. And then we get the awesome tech art team to help us out with the interactives, the lighting, the particle effects, of course the breakables, because everyone likes breaking stuff. Lots of stuff to blow up. So yeah, that's pretty much my job, and this is awesome. This is what I get to do every day. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. So I'll pass it off to Bender and Jill.
So now that we have a place to fight and a place to explore, there has to be stuff in it to discover. So I'm Jason Bender, game designer, and Jill and I are going to tell you a little bit about what we put in this world. So obviously, Diablo is about killing monsters, first and foremost. Some of you would argue, though, loot's pretty important. That's what we're all in it for anyway. So as you're going through these areas that you saw, like the inside of Bastion's Keep, you're not just killing monsters as you go. Every now and then you're stopping to kick open a barrel, seeing if a skeleton pops out, or clicking on a treasure chest to get some good loot. So when we populate the loot, we understand that you divide your time between these two things. So we have to put them fairly evenly throughout the world, so there's always something interesting to see, something new to find. One of the things, as you can see here, there are a number of chests in the world that we populate. There are common things like barrels to really rare golden chests, which might have a rare drop or a legendary item inside. We populate the world with thousands of potential places for these to be. Every one of them is hand-placed. We want to make sure that they're all in rational positions. We want to put corpses in places like battlefields and areas where there's been some kind of conflict. But we want to put treasure chests in libraries and other cool places where people would store stuff. So in this example, you can see just one area that's just completely littered with potential treasure chests. But anytime you go through this zone, only a few of them will actually populate with treasure. You never know what you're going to find, though, so you just got to keep your eyes open. So another way we can mix it up is with mini dungeons. So Pete just showed you that we take a lot of time making sure every dungeon looks really cool, but we make quite a few of them because Bastion's Keep's a big place. It's a big snowy fortress. But when you're going through the wilderness, you want to change a pace. You want to see something different. You might go from outside a kind of dark and dank wood, and then you might go inside to see some creepy cave. We can use these caves to introduce monsters. This is where these monsters come from. It's where they live. Also, they're really great for bite-sized goals. So, when you go into a small cave that you're going to find, it's not going to take too long. You're going to have a really rewarding exploration experience. And at the end of it, you're going to get a rare or a treasure, a rare treasure chest or a monster that you can fight. And that's really satisfying. It's a great opportunity for us to introduce story elements. Each one of these things is really interesting and unique. One of them might be where the Moon Clan store all their equipment. One of them might be a spider's den. And there's always opportunity for us to be telling more story. So on top of that, it doesn't all have to be a dungeon. Sometimes you might run into other kinds of events. You could just be walking through the swamp and boom, 500 zombies pop out. Suddenly you gotta, kind of get your wits about you and start using your skills. And this is a great thing for us to bring the world to life by using monsters in an interesting way and unique hazards that you may not have seen before. It really makes the world more colorful. So when you're, as they say, hoovering an area, you're going from end to end, looking for every treasure chest, trying to kill every monster. We can really make that interesting and variable and really add some random elements to the world. Also, it's a great opportunity for us to introduce more story elements where you might run into not just necessarily zombies popping up out of the ground, but you might see an NPC whose wagon is overturned, needs help, and then you have to help them on their quest, and it gives you sort of a side thing to think about, and it just keeps things different. So Jill's going to tell you a little bit about other things we can put in the world to keep it interesting.
Hi, I'm Jill. I'm a technical artist on Diablo. So one of the other details that we put a lot of attention to is objects that you can interact with, usually by smashing them. You may be wondering why we think it's so important to put these objects around, because they're just decoration, but it's really more than that. First of all, it is a lot of fun to break things, and you could clear a whole room of all the monsters and then go back around and kill all the furniture if you want. It also makes your character feel really powerful because you're ground stomping so hard that the walls are crumbling. It also makes the world feel a bit more real because you're really part of it. Your actions have a difference on the things that you're fighting near. Because if you summoned your magical arcane orbs near a pile of barrels, it would be really unrealistic if the barrels didn't fall down. And we also, as Kevin was saying, we take even these opportunities to put a bit of story into the world. Not every story is a long epic. These are more little stories that you can make up for yourselves, like why was this poor guy left on the torture rack, or why is this barrel filled with blood?
So yeah, we've seen some treasure chests, we've seen some stuff to break. That's all well and good, but you know, what do we get to kill, right? All these skills and runes you've put together, this is so that you can do some battle. So what lives in this world? That's something that we ask ourselves when we're placing monsters. When we place monsters in any given area, there are a combination of things that might appear together in a random assortment as far as how they're laid out in the world, but not random in what appears together. So we like to look at an area and say, okay, what lives in this particular dungeon that makes it different from the last one? Also, it's important for game pacing. If the entire area is just littered with fallen and nothing else, and no treasure chests, that's going to be kind of boring. You're just hitting the same power. But we've taken special care to make sure the runes and the skills really give you a lot of variability in your gameplay, and the monsters are what you're going to use these against. That's what it's all about. So we try to mix it up so that you have interesting mechanics, and so that you can use, in this example, I mean, you can see that there were a lot of little guys running around. You could use crowd control on, or big area effect. There was a big guy you might need to burn down with some really pointed damage. You can use your mobility to jump around the room. So we try to make sure that when we put monsters together, they live as a family. There's the big guy, there's the caster, there's the ranged guy, and there's the little guys that swarm you. And we like to make sure that there's always a variety of things so that you're always on your toes. Also, if you happen to see this guy when you're playing out there on the show floor, beat the candy out of him. He's always got good loot, but he's hard to catch.
So monsters. Monsters are not usually born because we can't really figure out which ones are male and female. So the way we make them is each monster gets a team of people from every area of development. There's art, design, programming, animation, and tech art, which is me. And design will usually come to us with an idea of the role they want the monster to fill. There's swarmers, there's casters, debuffers. And in this case, the monster that we're looking at is still under construction. And he doesn't have a real name yet, but internally we've been calling him the Brick House, because that's kind of what he is. He's big, he's strong, he's smashy. And we wanted a guy that was a little bit different from your average humanoid. So the concept team came up with this interesting design. And from there we take it to the modeling team. And this was a rough model that the team first made. And we took it for a spin in the game. And in this case, we found he had a few problems. Mainly he was too wide to fit in the corridors of the dungeons. So we go back to the drawing board, and the art team takes this opportunity to try lots of different ideas. We wanted to make him a little narrower so he would work, but we wanted to keep the sort of interesting, unique silhouette that he had. We liked the final body shape that was made, but we were not sure what to do with his arms. So we have a lot of debates. Every detail we have arguments about. We've talked about his toenails for hours. And these are some of the many ideas that we tried for his arms. Anything you can think of, we probably tried. But in the end, we decided that we liked the idea of the huge forearms, because they could be used to protect himself against attacks. So this was the finished model, and from there it went on to rigging and animation, and got some personality. And after that, we get to test it in the game. So we threw on some skills and some effects, and made sure that it reacted well to various skills, and it was fun to fight, that it wasn't boring at all to fight with. And possibly most importantly, we want it to be fun to kill, which is coming up now. Come on, there he goes. Because to us, one of the most important stages in any monster's life is really death. We want to create epic death experiences for you guys. So every monster, we put a lot of attention into making sure that it dies in a different way, something that's suited to how it acts in the world. We want to have a lot of visual variety. We want it to be really satisfying every time you smash a monster, and maybe sometimes we maybe want to gross you out just a little bit.
All right, so now that Jill has picked on a bunch of defenseless monsters, I'm going to go over a little bit about what gameplay programmers do to give the monsters a fighting chance. So we're going to talk about monster behaviors, monster AI. So here's an example of a really early a monster that we had in the game called the Gravedigger. As you can see from the concept art, he's like a humanoid guy. He makes his living digging up graves, probably attack you with that shovel. Surly guy. So we looked at him, he's a human, so start out with an idle state, an unalert state, what he does when the player's not around. So maybe he's digging a little bit, wandering, digging a little bit. And the player gets close to him. He goes into a suspicious state, like I've heard something. Like he kind of wanders around a little bit in a suspicious mode. Then when you get close enough, then he goes into an aggressive state, starts attacking you. So this is what this looks like. If you look to the right of the video, he's coming up here. So there he is. He's digging. Pretend this is a graveyard. He hasn't seen the player yet. Okay, gets close. Oh, he's heard something. He's kind of looking around. He's suspicious. Player gets closer. Now he sees him, and he goes and attacks him. Well, as you can probably imagine, I mean, this is what actually happens when players encounter the Gravedigger. So what did we learn, and what did the Gravedigger teach us? First is that in our game, normal enemies have very short lifespans. And that's on purpose. That's by design. We really want the player to feel awesome. We want the player to feel really powerful. So we want you to be able to mow through normal enemies and not really have, be spending a lot of time fighting them. And secondly, non-combat behaviors really aren't seen. Our game is an action game. Players engage our enemies really, really quickly. As soon as the enemy's on the screen, players are clicking on them. There's fireballs descending on them, magic missiles, all kinds of things. It's really not a kind of game where people want to try and sneak around monsters. So taking this, we have to pick and choose our opportunities where we can showcase the AI, give the monsters a little flavor. So we can do that in three places mainly. First is when they spawn, like during their spawning animation. So you'll see that's when they come onto the screen. So you've seen in our demo, we have some guys climbing up the walls, skeletons are bursting out of barrels, that kind of thing. Second is what Jill showed you, which is their deaths. So during deaths, we have a big opportunity to sort of show you a lot more about the character of the monster too. So spiders will shrivel up and shake, and skeletons will burst into an explosion of bones, that kind of thing. And the third is during the combat itself. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the details of our combat. So what's the goal of a combat AI? Is it to kill the monster efficiently? It seems kind of obvious, but it turns out it isn't for us. Really, our goal is to make the player feel awesome. And it seems kind of weird, so let me show you an example of this. So here we've got our new class, Demon Hunter. She's got a crossbow. And you can see she's fighting 3 fallen grunts. And since she's got a ranged weapon, she keeps trying to create space for herself. Take a step back, fire, take a step back, fire. But these enemies are super efficient in how they're trying to attack the player. Anytime they see a gap, they're closing the gap and immediately swinging with their clubs. So you can see that her little microing, her little attempt to try and get away from the monsters really isn't working at all. This doesn't really feel awesome for the player. In fact, it feels pretty frustrating. So what can we do? Just by adding a few simple things, we can really affect the situation here. So adding the concept of forced delays. So the first thing is we add a closing delay, and it's really, really subtle. So when the monster wants to close on the player, when it wants to close that gap, we actually hold them back just for a little bit of time. It's almost imperceptible. You can't really see it. Also an attack warm-up. So even after the monster gets up to the player and wants to swing his club, we prevent him from doing that for a very small